Well, shalom everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. We're up to page 92 of volume 2 of Rabbi Victor Miller's new translation and commentary of Duties of the Mind. And today we're asking the question, is reflection a duty? Is reflection a duty? By the way, forgive me if there's any kind of distortion with the audio. Just got a fan going off camera. It's a bit warm in here today. So we looked in previous videos at the world around us, at nature, and we've looked very recently at what appears to be a great diversity in nature. Certainly we see a diversity of animals in the sea. We see a diversity of all types of things. Water, we have fire, we have wind, we have rain, we have the sun, we have the moon, we have soil, and they all look like they're doing their own thing, and they all look uniquely different and have uniquely different functions to something else. But when we investigate these things and thoroughly go very deep into them, we find that they are all sort of singing this harmonious song, and they're all dependent on one another. There's nothing that's here for no reason. Do we have an obligation to study the details of nature or not? Perhaps it's only for the Tzaddikim, the pious people who wish to go beyond the line of duty, the Hasidim. To answer this question, we say that we are duty-bound to study all created things to find proof in them of the Creator's wisdom. And if we're not doing that, we're basically saying to the Creator that we're not interested in the world around us, we're not even interested in our own lives, so how can we at all show or even say that we're interested in you, the origin of all things? And so you might meet people like this every so often in your life, somebody who's really jaded by life, and there's nothing in life that kind of excites them anymore, and they're just sort of limping along, and normally they'll be pursuing like high-end forms of enjoyment that are risky, like drugs or whatever, and they're really kind of pushing themselves along that path of no return. They've really kind of sort of given up on life, and they're just sort of living from one moment to the next. And so we want to do the opposite of that. We want to even look into mundane things and see, okay, what's all this about? I've always been fascinated why the Defense Force have such a fixation on a person keeping his general living area so clean and tidy, and a fixation, what appears to be a fixation with ironing. And essentially you're training these people to go and kill other people. What's ironing got to do with killing somebody? And yet it is all interrelated. But it's not until you start looking into it that you find out how it relates, to being able to go, to another geographical location to break things and kill people, and how it relates to making sure that your clothes are cleaned and pressed, Okay, so the source of this obligation is first our own common sense, and we're going to be looking into the area of common sense, which tells us we're obligated to do it. And the second is stated in the Kisvei HaKodesh, the Holy Scriptures, and we'll look at that too. And thirdly, it is stated in the rabbinic tradition, the words of the Chachamim, that is, of the wise ones. And we're going to look at that. When the author says it's an obligation, he means that the obligation is for people who are capable. Some people, like children or uneducated individuals, are incapable or are not capable of such things. For them, it is enough that they hear from people who are capable. However, anyone who is intelligent has a duty to think about these things and see in them the wisdom and kindness of Hashem, the plan and purpose. And we see the opposite of that today in universities, where they're doing everything they can to do the opposite of that and propel people in the opposite direction of seeing intelligent design, which is insane. But it's what we're stuck with, it's what we're going to deal with. He proves this three ways. Number one, using logical arguments of common sense. Number two, from verses in the Tanakh. And three, from the teachings of our sages, which we pretty much just said. So let's look at the first proof, which is common sense. This is 2.2. We can demonstrate the obligation through logical argument, that is, from common sense. Because common sense testifies that the superiority of a person, it testifies that the superiority of a person over an animal is because of his greater insight and understanding. a human being just on a base level is able to examine a situation and change the environment, whereas an animal isn't normally able to articulate and make something. A human being just on a very base level, without looking at the sekel, the intellect, is extremely just on a different level altogether than the most sophisticated animal. And remember, animal is something, what is classified as an animal is something that hasn't been given sekel. It hasn't been given intellect. It's just got instinct. What makes a human being better than an animal? One cannot teach a monkey wisdom, or nor can one teach it to fly. A person can acquire wisdom, and that is the greatest difference between man and other creatures. As the verse says, quoting from Job 35:11, he teaches us more than the beasts of the earth, and he makes us wiser than the birds of the sky. It's quoting from Job there. The verse clearly implies that a man's wisdom is the basis of his superiority. Now, if we are not going to use that wisdom, what purpose is there in having it? The most important purpose of any creature is to acknowledge its creator. Since the superiority of man over animals is his wisdom, it is evident that mankind has been given this wisdom for the purpose of recognizing and acknowledging the creator. So an animal which functions without sekel, that acknowledges its creator by doing its function. So a spider acknowledges its creation by spinning a web and capturing its prey and eating its prey. And so in that sense, for that spider, that's akin to praise. And so all animals that do their job are actually acknowledging their creator. This is one of the things that happened to David HaMelech. Once he finished the entirety of the Psalms, compiling Psalms, Sefer Tehillim, he was kind of pretty proud of himself, and Hashem sort of pulled him up and said, listen, you're no more successful in your life than this worm who is doing the entirety of what my expectations are of it in its life as a worm. So don't get so caught up in yourself now that you've produced this Sefer that's going to be the most sought after and most used of all the holy writ in everyday life of a religious person. One of the things you've got to realize is that the book of Tehillim, Psalm, Sefer Tehillim, is used predominantly throughout the prayer life of every Jew throughout the year. And there's no other book that is drawn upon so heavily, not even the Torah itself, than from the book of Psalms, which is just mind-blowing considering that this isn't actually part of the Torah. It's a separate book, and yet it is the book that you will find features most heavily and most prevalent in all prayer-based Siddurim and high holy day services and things like that. It's mind-boggling. But Hashem is like pulling David back and saying, listen, okay, you're really excited that that's something that you've achieved. I'm telling you that this worm has achieved more than you by doing its role to the letter. This worm didn't get, caught up in a scandal, with somebody else's wife. And David's like, okay, I get it. And he pulled his head in. The verse clearly implies that man's wisdom is the basis of his superiority. Now, if we're not going to use that wisdom, that purpose, what purpose is there in having it? So man, how he praises Hashem, which is one form of praise, is that he utilizes his wisdom. And there's plenty of people who do not utilize their wisdom. Most people utilize their physicality. A woman might entice a man by taking pictures of herself or video of herself and showing it to him. And this will entice a man to want to be with her. This stirs up his animal soul. And after a while, the man realizes that this woman hasn't got anything more to her than what sates the animal soul. And after a while, this sating of his animal soul starts to kind of get old as he becomes more familiar with her. And then pretty soon, he's no longer finds any intrigue or interest in her because he's become so familiar with her materially that she doesn't bring anything to the table in terms of her intellect or her wisdom. She doesn't challenge him. She doesn't inspire him, and the pursuing the base animalistic desires and have them sated, they only sort of last for so long, and in time the material calmliness of the body begins to fade as well. So coupled with the fact that the person becomes overly familiar with the person's materiality, that materiality also declines. So, those of you that are kind of still watching this, perhaps I don't know how you're watching this video, but if you are, and you're still taken with sort of posing, and putting photos up on Instagram or some social media platform, ultimately that's all you've got, and that only will get you so far, and you're never going to find happiness going down that route, because you're showing everything you've got, which isn't much, because ultimately it doesn't stand the test of time. It doesn't stand the test of time. A good man is not going to hang around forever just for something that's going to be able to appease and quench his animal soul. He needs spiritual. He needs more than that. In long term, he needs someone who can challenge him spiritually as well. The Creator insists the spirit of man with him is wisdom. It is evident that mankind has been given this wisdom for the purpose of recognizing and acknowledging the Creator. And that's what they do the opposite of in universities. They somehow manage to sort of drop the ball on that monumentally. When a person thinks about and delves into the foundations of wisdom and he studies its signs by which Hashem's wisdom can be recognized in the world, then his superiority over animals will be in proportion to his understanding. So, even if you're a bit of a simpleton, who knows if I feel like I'm a simpleton half the time, most of the time. There's still things that are there for you to explore and to get revelation from. There's something for everyone, but you've got to just be willing to throw your hat in the ring and do the work and make the claim and, get the job done. You're not going to get this by sort of lazing around on the beach or sitting in front of Netflix. There is a difference between the technicalities of wisdom and the foundations of wisdom. Consider the wisdom associated with the apple. To know how to plant apples or to cook apples is a technicality of wisdom. But the foundation of wisdom is to look at the apple and wonder how the apple came to be colored so beautifully red. There's probably millions of people that know how to do different things to apples. Cook them, boil them, but they've never really sort of wondered why there's apples is the shape the way it is. It's shaped the way it is, and it has the various colors that it does. It is to wonder how the apple came to be enclosed in a skin that protects it against deterioration from contact with the outside world. So it's technically an apple comes in its own wrapping. Once the skin is removed, the apple immediately begins to deteriorate. And how does it happen that there are seeds inside? And how does it happen that it's sweet? These are the things that should strike first in our minds. So even a fairly simple person can kind of come to those conclusions. But we don't. We tend to not think about that. We go for, more far-flung, deeper things. Because this is an apple. I get an apple every day. There's an apple in my, in my bag that I have for lunch every day. But have you ever thought about all the things that are happening, that are going on with that apple? And we don't do that. We tend to not even think about an apple. These are the foundations of the wisdom in the apple. As soon as a man sees these things and thinks along these lines, he is demonstrating the superiority of his mind over the mind of an animal. Following its instincts, an animal may choose an apple and either eat it or manipulate it, but that is not a sign of an animal's wisdom. Is the animal able to study the apple and wonder how it came to be, so beautifully wrapped and so well structured with seeds inside? Is the animal able to see that there exists in the apple all the information needed on how to produce another apple tree? These things occur to the intelligent mind, and that's what makes man superior to animals. So an animal comes along an apple, he looks at it, sniffs it, and eats it. a human being can come along to an apple and say, look, this is a piece of fruit that's grown from a tree with its own wrapping already on it. And it also has seeds inside it that can perpetuate after itself if planted in the earth. And that's all it needs is moist soil, and another tree, a complex tree that will bear an infinite and countless amount of other apples is pre-programmed inside those seeds which are in that apple that you're eating. And it's also a color that stands out, so you know that where it is on the tree to pluck that apple. Particularly when it's ready and ripe to be eaten, it usually becomes more noticeable. Up to that point, it's sort of almost camouflaged within the color of the tree. But if a person closes his mind to these thoughts, he would not be equivalent to an animal, rather he would be inferior to it. An animal at least is not to blame. It doesn't have the ability to think these thoughts, but a person has the ability, and if he doesn't utilize it, he is considered inferior to the animal. So here's you sort of thinking, yeah, I'm not that bad, I'm quite a nice guy. And you're standing before the Beit Din and Shemayim, and they're saying, you're less than an animal. And you go, well, hang on, what do you mean? What do you mean I'm less than an animal? Well, an animal, when it sees something that's a natural thing that grows in the field, it just eats it because it's hungry. You do the same, but you've been given an intellect, you've been given a mind with wisdom. You never ever stopped once to think about the thing that you find is about to bring you sustenance that's just grown naturally from the field, that's required nothing from you, you've just come along and grabbed it. So that animal is superior to you, so how do you want us to judge you? How can we judge you in a way that's going to be favorable to you when you're not even functioning any much better than an animal in the field? We've gone through your whole life, you've never sat down and wondered at the phenomenon of an apple, and it's no surprise that you never really thought about the Creator, because none of your thoughts led you to be astounded by the things that the Creator has actually constructed for you, because you never bothered to think about any of the things that you're given. You just get them. You see what I'm saying? So it's a whole different way of thinking about things, and it's crucial for you, because it is the only thing that separates you from the animal kingdom. And you should be completely separate from the animal kingdom because of your ability to think through problems and think deeply about things. But a person has the ability, and if he doesn't utilize it, he is considered inferior to the animals. As the verse states in Isaiah 1:3, an ox knows its owner, a donkey recognizes the feeding through the feed trough of its master. And the people of Israel do not know who is the one who sustains them. My nation takes no thought. So that's a verse you're probably familiar with. An ox knows its owner. A donkey recognizes the feeding trough of its master. But the people of Israel do not know who is the one who sustains them. My nation takes no thought. So now that verse reads to you, it should read to you in a way that's slightly different, because before you've just basically looked at that and gone, oh yeah, that's Israel, they don't appreciate their God, and then you just moved on. And that's not wrong, that's a correct summarization of what that verse is getting at, but you've never really understood how they've gone about their lives in a way that doesn't really appreciate Hashem, and you maybe would have never thought that it's the very baseline of that is the mere fact of seeing things that are in the world that are natural, that sustain man, how the Creator has been operating through chesed, through kindness, to bring us the privilege of being able to attain those exquisite things. And not only that, a diversity of nice things. There's things that are different shapes, different densities, and different smells, and all these have different appeals and different scents that we can enjoy. How often have you ever sat down and thought about thanking the Creator over the different types of flavors of foods that a person can enjoy? Maybe never. Okay, let's start at the end of this video. Sit down and go, thank you, Hashem, for the beautiful taste of popcorn with butter, for vanilla ice cream, for the taste of a nice spicy curry, that I can taste and I can enjoy a curry or a juicy steak. And there's such different tastes that I love, because Hashem could have made one or two tastes being the only different types of tastes of foods in the world. But he didn't. He made almost an infinite number of different smells and aromas and flavors and tastes of foods. The ox and the donkey are loyal to their master because they know that he gives them food. The prophet is criticizing the nation for not recognizing that an apple is a gift from a master designer and from a creator who is able to do things that nobody else can do. Such people fail to realize that they are worse than the beasts. Before we proceed, we must understand that there is another factor to consider. It is possible for people to recognize the wonders of nature, but still to be inferior to animals. In ancient times, there were pagans who foolishly thought that the wonders of the world were created by idols. So there were pagans that foolishly thought that the wonders of the world were created by idols that they themselves fashioned. In our own time, there are wicked apicursim, there are wicked heretics and atheists and scoffers who have developed theories of evolution and false prophecies to promote their heathen outlook and lifestyle. A person who allows himself to be influenced by them should know that these teachers of paganism are making him worse than an animal. So if you're in university and you're towing the line and learning what's the basic things that are taught in a university, if it's in the sciences, the teachers are technically making your ideology align with paganism, and it's just a fact. There's no point getting angry with me and putting a rude comment. It's just a fact. You need to launch yourself out of those institutions. Unless you're at university to be a doctor, or somebody in some critical role, and you require, several years at medical school or whatever, get out of those institutions as quickly as you possibly can, because they will kill you. Not physically, but they will kill you spiritually. They are absolute refuge, places of refuge, and they're worse than dens of iniquity. Absolutely worse than dens of iniquity. An animal will recognize the one who feeds him, whereas this person doesn't recognize because he's being misled by false theories. And that's an evolutionist. That's somebody who believes in evolution. They believe that everything that came about is through a random explosion, which is, they should be put in a mental institution, really. Number 3, part 3, second proof, written sources. And from scriptures we see the obligation to reflect on creation when it says, raise your eyes on high and see who created these things. And that's quoting from, again from Isaiah 40:26, Yeshayahu 40:26. Raise your eyes on high and see who created these things. And that's not what they're doing when they're teaching evolution. They're doing anything but that. By looking at the wonders of the heavens, we are drawn to think about who created them. In the heavens, we are amazed to see how the sun, the moon, and the stars are all precisely positioned and so regulated in their movements that we can use them accurately to measure time and distance. We see the sun has an effect on the earth by radiating warmth, light, and energy. We see how this makes possible our crops. We also see the effects of the moon on ocean tides. The verse tells us to look at all this and ask who created it. Thus, we see that it is an obligation to do it. Now, if you're a parent and your child asked you who created everything, and you're telling this child from a very young age that it all came about through a big bang, I don't know how things are going to go well for you and that child. You're just poisoning their minds. And it says in Psalm 8:4, when I see the heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you established. And these at times can be Christian children. with Christian parents telling them about evolution, and they're supposedly Christians. From this, we see that when a person looks at the heavenly bodies, he should clearly be able to see that they were made by Hashem. This is talking about the innocent world of our forefathers, when people did not need to contend with the confused and conflicted opinions of modern societies. But today, when the world is filled with distortions and outright lies, it is not easy, even for the thinking person, to see the truth that they are made by Hashem. And universities and all these types of institutions will do whatever they can to make the process of driving home their ideologies so dense that any mere question of it is an oddity. The mere merely questioning such a thing is an oddity, and no one really thinks to question it because it's so prevalent. Well, it's so ingrained and so prevalent and so entrenched now. Who would even bother to argue against all this stuff? And I use the term stuff very loosely. I'd rather use a different term, but I won't. Yeshayahu, Isaiah 40:21 says, "Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not contemplated the foundations of the world?" The verse is challenging us to consider how things started. The world did not start itself. Life cannot come from non-life. Order cannot come from disorder. Plan cannot come from chaos. When we look at the world, we see only plan, purpose, and order. From that, we surely should understand that Hashem is behind the whole plan of creation. From that, we should surely understand that Hashem is behind the whole plan of creation. The fact that a person does not recognize Hashem's wisdom in nature will never be an excuse, because there are ways and means of gaining the faculty of hearing and seeing. For instance, a person can go to those who can teach it, and he can turn to sources like the Kivot HaLevavot. So there's no excuse, especially now with the internet, to get on and find hundreds, if not thousands, of good teachings, good kosher teachings on various subjects. There's no excuse now. Now, the enemy has upped the game by making the accessibility to Tumah more prevalent, but also the accessibility to the Emet, to the truth, is also just as easy and prevalent. And so it's up to us in this last generation to reach for the good and not reach for the evil. And we're not even having to reach. There's no reaching involved. It's just a mere touch of a button. It's merely moving your hand over something and lowering a finger down on a button, and that you can have full access, whether good or bad. They will give him the ability to see despite all the falsehoods he has been exposed to, and despite his not being accustomed to thinking about these things. If he does so, he will be surprised, and he will gain eyes and ears, and he will begin to hear, and he will begin to see. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting, for that is the end of all man, and the living should take it to heart. I think I missed a bit. The verse is challenging us to consider how things started. Okay, let me just go back to Isaiah 40:21. I think I missed a couple of paragraphs. Please forgive me. So Isaiah 40:21, do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not contemplated the foundations of the world? The verse is challenging us to consider how things started. The world did not start by itself. Plan did not come from chaos. Yeah, we read that. O deaf ones. So this is another verse. This is again from Yeshayahu 42:18, Isaiah. O deaf ones, listen, and blind ones, look, so that you may see. Those who are deaf should begin to hear, and those who are blind should begin to see. The fact that a person does not recognize Hashem's wisdom in nature will never be an excuse, because there are always means of gaining the faculty of hearing and seeing. For instance, a person can go to those who can teach. He can turn to sources like the Kivot HaLevavot. They will give him the ability, despite all the falsehoods that he has been exposed to, and despite his not being accustomed to thinking about these things. If he does so, he'll be surprised and he'll gain eyes and ears, and he'll begin to hear and he'll begin to see. It's always good to go over the learning twice. As it says in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes 7:2, it is better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting, for that is the end of all man, and the living should take it to heart. In a house of mourning, people see that death is the end of every man. Not one person has gone along to a cemetery and not thought deeply about life at some point of their visit at the cemetery. Cemeteries have an uncanny ability of getting you to think about important stuff. They just do, because you look, and especially if you see you're at a funeral and you see a fresh hole that's dug and a box being lowered into a hole with that person in the box, a reality comes crashing down for every man, woman and child who attends a funeral. It's a very sobering experience. This should cause people to think about the purpose of life. Is it merely to die? How could that be? Is it possible that a human being with such noble aspirations and such great ideals should be put into the earth to rot away? Is that the end? And once we get starting asking ourselves about the purpose of life, we will travel further and further in that direction. So don't stop asking these questions, and let the questions reveal additional answers and strive for the revealed additional questions rather, and strive for deeper and deeper answers. So the more you have one question answered, go down the rabbit hole and get the next question answered, and keep going and keep going. That is why it's so worthwhile to go to a house of mourning, to remind ourselves that the normal routine of life won't always continue. The daily experiences of living, eating, working and sleeping will come to an end. We know that we expect more. We didn't expect merely to eat and sleep. Everyone has in his heart a yearning for something very great, something noble, that he is not able to achieve in this world. What is it that we are so eager for? What is it that we are so eager for? And when we think of the end of our life, we know that there must be something beyond the boundaries of life. We wake up to the thought that there is an afterlife. So we see from this verse that it is an obligation for people to take steps to cause their minds to start thinking and reflecting. As it says, quoting Kohelet, that is Ecclesiastes 2:14, the wise man has eyes in his head, whereas a fool walks in darkness. The wise man understands the purpose of the eyes that Hashem gave him and uses those eyes to see the light of wisdom. The light illuminates his path through life. A person who doesn't use his eyes is a fool. Such a person walks in darkness. Of course, every fool thinks he sees. He thinks he has eyes. He thinks his eyes are open, and so he must be seeing. However, that is not called having eyes. Eyes that are without wisdom are eyes that are closed. Eyes that are open without wisdom are eyes that are closed. In order to open his eyes, it is important for him to learn how to utilize this ability. And then he begins to see that the world is full of light and the teachings of wisdom. Otherwise, he is a fool who walks in darkness. As it says, quoting Proverbs, this is Mishlei, chapter 4, verse 18 through 19, the path of the righteous is like the gleam of sunlight, growing brighter until high noon. At the beginning of the daylight develops gradually. When the light of active reflection begins to shine on a person's thinking, everything is still dim and he is not at all convinced. But he should continue to look for the truth and to think more and more about the evidence of Hashem's wisdom in the world. And after a while, it will become clear to him that he will see things with the full light of conviction. So after a while, it will become clear to him that he will see things with the full light of conviction. He will see the truth by training his mind little by little for its career of seeing. Nobody should expect that when he hears these words of the Kavod HaLevavot, he will immediately open his eyes and begin to see. It takes time. and practice. But after a while, it will seem so open and so apparent that he'll be amazed that he was never able to see it before. And those of you that have been on this journey with me for a while will notice, your thinking and your attitude to things will have shifted somewhat. And you'll be seeing things with a level of detail and insight, and you'll be questioning things in a good way when things happen to you, and not jump to false conclusions. In fact, you'll be finding positive things out of what appears to be initially bad things that may happen to you, Chas v'shalom. The way of the wicked is like darkness. They don't know how they are stumbling. Even though they think they see everything, they're constantly stumbling over the great principles of life. One of the most important principles is to be grateful to our Creator. Another great principle is to recognize that there is a plan in life. Life is not purposeless. People need to accomplish something in their lifetime. They must also recognize the greatness of mankind. If the plan of life is to accomplish something, people need to properly utilize the resources that they have access to. One of the most important means of accomplishment is to wisely utilize relationships with other people. One of the most important means of accomplishment is to wisely utilize relationships with other people. That includes somebody that you're stuck with at work that drives you nuts. That person that's driving you nuts may be there to teach you something, or may be there to give you a certain feeling in response to a behavior that you perhaps exhibited at some point. I had a long-term working relationship with a gentleman at my former 2 jobs ago now, and it was very difficult to work with this guy for the first couple of years, and he would be a source of a lot of discomfort and grief for me. But as the years rolled on, I grew to respect this person and know that this person had things to teach me that I didn't have. And even though he had an attitude and he had a way he went about certain things that I knew were wrong, there were certain things that he had that I didn't have as well as he had. So I decided to utilize this individual to learn from the things that he displayed that I didn't have. And then after a while, I noticed that he was also picking up on things that I had that he didn't have. And so over time, in an unspoken way, we both began to get along with one another and learn the things about one another that were good that each of us didn't have. And we both became friends. But for the first couple of years, putting it lightly, it was a very rocky relationship. It took me years to realize this guy actually has some qualities that are very unique. And if I can get those qualities and ignore the bad ones, this won't be for nothing, me working with this guy. And as I said, lo and behold, he noticed that I had things that he didn't have. I was able to cop a lot of flack. He was somebody that wasn't able to really sort of take any flack. And so I began to develop sort of my thick skinness in this environment. There are various other things that I got from him and he got from me, and it was an amazing thing that occurred. I could have, many years ago, I could have just quit the job and moved on, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I would have missed out on learning some very important things that this guy had to teach me. And, like I said, he wasn't perfect. He had some really bad traits, but he had some other traits that very few people have. One of the most important principles is to be grateful to the Creator. Another great principle is to recognize that there is a plan in life. Life is not purposeless. Life isn't purposeless. People need to accomplish something in their lifetime. They must also recognize the greatness of mankind. If the plan of life is to accomplish something, people need to properly utilize the resources that they have access to. One of the most important means of accomplishing is to wisely utilize relationships with other people, Reshaim, that is wicked people, who walk in the darkness, stumble, and make all kinds of serious errors, such as dealing with other people in the most low and despicable way. Of course, they try to glorify their wickedness to justify themselves, but people who can see well recognize how Reshaim have stumbled. They have ruined their lives with the very worst corruption because they are blind to the purpose of life. A lot of people are selling themselves on the internet, and they don't realize that they're getting all this income now, and what it's actually done to their lives, especially if they have kids. A lot of these people have children, and they're letting things get in the public domain that are quite damning, and they're getting lots of money, but eventually that's going to dry up, and at some point they're going to want to live normal lives, and they're going to find that they've been able to maybe acquire some material things, that the cost of it has been too much to bear, and they would have been much better living much more meager circumstances, meager surroundings, having a faithful and a loving partner, and people around them that love them and respect them. Now they've lost all that, and they've got a nice mansion, that eventually, unless they can invest money very, very wisely, it's all going to come running out, because their physicality is not going to maintain for more than 10, 20 years max. So eventually it's going to come home to roost. They're not going to find themselves to be able to be as employable as they were if they do want to get back into a normal job. And anybody before long who gets to know them, new friends that they meet, it's very easy for them to find out their past. It's not hard to find things out anymore. Obligations of reflection. The main point of what has been said is so far is that Hashem filled the world with manifestations of His wisdom and His kindness. As it says in Shacharit prayer on Shabbos, His greatness and His kindness fill the world. Hashem expects us to study these signs and testimonies. The author demonstrates that provided it from the verses. Sorry, he then provided it. He then proved it from the verses in the Tanakh. These verses confirm that we need to use our eyes and our mind to see our Creator's miracles in the Bria, in creation. Because the purpose of the Bria is to testify to the Creator. And now the author proceeds to prove his obligation from rabbinic tradition, the words of the Chachamim. So part 4, the third proof is the rabbinic tradition. The sages said, quoting Tractate Shabbos 75a, anyone who knows how to calculate the cycles of the seasons, the tekufot, and the constellations, the mazalot, but does not do so, about him the verse says, quoting from Yeshayahu 5:12, they are a harp and a lyre and a drum and a flute and a wine. There are a harp and a lyre and a drum and a flute and wine at their drinking parties, but they never think about what Hashem has done, and they take no note of His handiwork. So somebody who has the ability to provide a community with a calendar, and they don't, because not all, one of the funniest things I used to see in the Messianic world is people would make their own calendars, and they would tell you with a straight face, be able to pass a lie detector, that their calendar that they made is better than the rabbinic calendar that's currently used in the rabbinic world. And you just don't know where to look. You don't know whether to laugh. You don't know whether to cry. And it boggles the mind. These people have no clue into the history of the world of Judaism and all of the things that they have been brought to bear in terms of the greats and the experts in various fields that would just make them look like, less than a speck of dust in a field. And yet they're gonna be fronting the Beit Din Shemayim, with their own sort of calendar that they've sort of hodgepodge together because they thought they knew best. But on the flip side, if you do know best and you have undergone the counsel of many and you choose not to, you have the ability to build a house and somebody doesn't, and you don't, go down that route, you're not fulfilling your particular purpose. And don't get me wrong, there's people that have skills to do more than one thing, but ultimately, you're not here to arrive in the same vein as a person arriving at a theme park to just be entertained all day and go on rides and, eat sort of sugar-laden food. Every person is here for a purpose. Knowledge of knowledge of Tekufot and Mazalot, that is the seasons and the constellations, can be by means to help society. These kinds of astronomical calculations can be used to determine when the first of the month, Rosh Chodesh, should be declared and whether to declare a leap year. A person who knows how to do these calculations but doesn't deserves to be grouped with those only interested in music, wine, and parties. They neglect the marvelous world that Hashem has created. By censoring them, the sages show their disdain for those who do not look and reflect on the works of Hashem. So there was a guy at my school who was a bully. He was a wicked person, but he was very smart. He had a good head on his shoulders in terms of he was quick-witted. He could have been a very good student, a top A1 class student. Many times I even marveled at the guy's handwriting. But he was somebody that was always getting into trouble. And his younger brother followed suit, and not long after, his brother died from a drug overdose. But this guy, I can't stress enough, he was not, academically, he was not stupid. But he was always getting into trouble, and made matters worse that his father kept enabling this behavior by coming and giving the teachers a hard time. And I don't know what ever happened to that guy, but he was really just trouble. But he was not an idiot. But he chose to be a wicked person. He chose to be not a nice person. I even spoke to him on several occasions, and I said, "Man, you should put in some hard yards, like keep a low profile and just." And sometimes I thought I got to him, but no, it didn't work out. From where do we know that it is a person's duty, if he is capable to calculate the Tekufot and the Mazalot in order to help society? You shall safeguard and perform the decrees and the ordinances. This is your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the nations who will hear all these decrees. Quoted from Deuteronomy 4:6. What kind of wisdom and understanding is recognized by the nations of the world? It is the calculations of the Tekufot and Mezulot. It's no far cry to acknowledge that the Jews gave the world the 7-day week. Where do you think the 7-day week came from? It came from the nation of Israel, who were given the 10 Commandments and the 613 laws of the Torah. The whole world acknowledges that Israel, are the priestly class of mankind. It's just common sense. They've given the world everything through Hashem's grace and mercy. But people don't stop long enough waving a Palestinian flag and being in a march to think about that. They just think the paycheck they're going to get for being paid to march for a cause that they have no idea about, but they're getting a paycheck for. The author derives the obligation to study Hashem's handiwork from the study of the Tefakot and the Mezalot. Although there are many benefits to studying this topic, the main interest to Jews is the benefit of knowing the halakha for establishing dates such as Rosh Chodesh and the leap year. These calculations depend on astronomical knowledge, such as understanding how to determine the precise length of the lunar month cycle between 29 and 30 days. In ancient times, when the new moon was sighted, it was important to determine whether its sighting was reasonable based on the calculations of the lunar cycle. Later, the calculations were used to make the Luar calendar that we are dependent upon today. But before the Luar is fixed, in the days of Hillel Hanasi, everyone relied on the Chachamim who studied the heavens and knew the motions of the heavenly bodies. A person who is capable of doing this but doesn't is considered as refusing to study the works of Hashem. Now you think about it. Somebody, especially in temple times, who refused to, had the potential and the capability easily to study the signs of heaven and chose not to, is throwing the entire livelihood, spiritual livelihood of Israel into jeopardy, because by not knowing when Rosh Chodesh is and not knowing what other important high holidays are, you're robbing the entire nation potentially being able to keep the Torah in very important places such as Yom Kippur. So, Hashem has put people in the world with the ability to construct a mishkan, a tabernacle. He has put people in the world with the ability to handle medicines and invent things and enable man to fly. And they said in Avot 2:1, the Ethics of the Fathers, calculate the cost of a mitzvah against its reward and the benefits of a sin against its cost. Oh, that's a great line. Calculate the cost of a mitzvah, that is a good deed, a love deed, a commandment, against its reward and the benefits of a sin against its cost. A person should compare what he gains by doing a mitzvah with the cost of doing the mitzvah, and he should compare what benefits he gets from an avera, a sin, with the price he will have to pay. So anything that you do related to Kiruv has unprecedented rewards. So anything you can do to promote Judaism, and I'm talking Judaism, not any other strain of Judaism, Orthodox Judaism is what I'm talking about, and you're in some way helping to promote that to non-religious Jews, and you're enabling other people to share the message to get more Jews to become religious, is worth a lot. Is worth a lot, let's just say. That's not merely talking about the reward and the punishment of the world to come. So there's punishments that we can get not only in the hereafter, but also in the current world, that often are overlooked. So not only can we get punished in our judgment on the other side of the veil, but we can also be punished here in the here and now. Even in this world, his behavior is likely to have consequences. Often after doing a mitzvah, a person will see that it was for his benefit, possibly in terms of his health or a longer life. The Torah offers the benefit of a longer life, but people don't usually think about that. Likewise, doing an avera is likely to have a harmful effect on a person. In one way or another, it is to his detriment. So, if somebody smokes cigarettes or drinks a lot of alcohol, is regular high consumer of alcohol, it's going to shorten their life. And both of those acts aren't just good on a health level, and they also can bring with them some social ills as well. Not to mention the fact that it makes a person smell, and a person acts stupid and can embarrass themselves. And so ultimately, by watching this video and any other Torah-related video that's kosher, you are adding to the longevity of your life on earth. But not only that, you are potentially adding to the pleasantness of your existence on earth. You can live another 60 years be in pain, that's pretty rough. But, living, another 10 years and be 100% healthy is priceless. So by learning Torah, you will extend and improve the quality of your life. And by doing good deeds, doing a mitzvah, donating, giving tzedakah, charity, you will extend your life. It's just a fact. How's that a fact? It's a fact, trust me. While other people enjoy ups and downs in their lives, they win lotto, they move into mansions, look for them in a few years' time and you'll see that they're no longer in the mansion and they may no longer even be alive, but you in your little old shack down the road, you're adding a new room to that in a few weeks. Okay, you're not living in a mansion, but you've always been able to pay your bills, you've always been able to have a roof over your head and wear decent clothes. But you'll see these people, they're like flames, they burn quickly and then they're snuffed out. For example, eating snails is forbidden, and the Torah says it is sheketz, an abomination to you. In regions where snails are common, Large numbers of people suffered from diseases associated with snails. An American soldier who was stationed in Egypt and went swimming in Egyptian waters. Many contracted snail disease. Such effects are all the more likely when snails are consumed. Even thinking about abominable things could have a harmful effect and must be avoided. So try not to think about negative things and things that are no good for you. You know they're no good for you to think about, so don't think about them. And this is what we're doing. We're learning the duties of the mind. Okay, let's go through a summary. Immediacy of reward and punishment. We should reflect on the effect of doing a mitzvah on our daily lives. Besides the reward and punishment in the world to come, these effects are all part of the wonders of creation. It's all the Pharisees had to really hold on to, was punishments in the here and now, or rewards in the here and now, because they didn't believe in an afterlife. Hashem made kosher things for our benefit and non-kosher things for us to avoid. All these things are part of his wisdom and his kindness to us. And they said, quoting Eruvin 100b, tractate Eruvin 100b, even if the Torah has not been given to Israel, suppose there was no Torah, we could have learned modesty from a cat. Male and female cats are never seen propagating in the street. One might see dogs doing this, but never cats. Cats also prefer to seek private place where they can take care of their needs. In contrast, dogs relieve themselves out in the open, right in the street. Why did Hashem give the cat that nature? The answer is so that we should learn from it. Of course, we need to know from whom to learn. If we want to learn from a dog's immodest behavior, we are making a mistake. So what do we learn from a dog? We learn a dog has unconditional love. So, different animals, we can learn different things. That's why we have the Torah, which tells us that what we must do. However, in order to reinforce this lesson, to make it more vivid, we should learn from the cat too. And therefore Hashem wants us to look at animals which have certain good qualities and study these qualities. We could have learned chastity from a dove. Once a pair of doves mate, they remain faithful to each other for the rest of their lives. There are no doves among the doves. There are no divorces among the doves. There are no divorces among the doves. This is our model, and we are expected to reflect on it. Marriage should be forever and ever. We could have learned manners from the rooster. Before it mates, the rooster courts the hen by bowing and behaving with politeness. Similarly, before a man mates with a wife, he should behave with special politeness and patience. He must court her with tender words and courtesy. And we could have learned from stealing, and we could have learned about stealing, that is, about having respect for each other's property from the ant. Once an ant touches a crumb, no other ant will touch it. Even if the first ant drops the crumb and goes elsewhere, no other ant will pick it up because he leaves a little scent on the crumb. The means by which other ants sense that crumb has an owner is by the smell of a chemical substance called pheromone, which the ant leaves on each crumb it touches. The odor of the pheromone is unique to each ant. The other ants don't mind the odor, but because they sense that it belongs to another ant, they will not touch it. This behavior demonstrates that respect for private property is principle in nature. It teaches us to avoid stealing. Now, you're not going to know this until you sit down and examine day after day an ant's nest. But somebody's obviously done that for us. But isn't it unique that the more you look, the more you learn? Somebody, ants! All that a person maybe has come up on a person's radar of ants is how ants bit the person when they were having a picnic one day. So, they ask in the Beit Din of Shemaim, they say, so what's your experience with ants? Oh yeah, they bit me and caused me harm when I was picnicking one day. Is that all you've got to say about ants? Yep. Okay. It has now been demonstrated that there is a duty to reflect on creation and to draw conclusions from the signs of Hashem's wisdom in it. You should keep this in mind. Note, the author believes he has presented enough arguments from common sense, from the Tanakh, and from our rabbinic tradition to convince us that we have the duty to look into the Word and see the wisdom and the kindness of Hashem. Reflecting on the orange. When you look at an orange, you should stop and think why its skin is so beautifully colored on the outside, while on the inside there is no color at all. Even this common fruit, you find evidence of Hashem's wisdom. There is a color only in the outside so that people should see it and have an appetite to eat the orange. The orange has a thin plastic-like coating on the outside. A thin plastic is so strong that rarely does a worm penetrate an orange. And why are the seeds on the orange so bitter? Even the scientists admit that the bitterness is so that the people won't eat the seeds. Rather, they spit out the seeds so that the new trees can grow from them. So wherever you look, you see the Chokmat Hashem, the wisdom of Hashem, and the Chesed of Hashem, the kindness of Hashem. And it's your duty to think about these things and to talk about them, which guess what? That's what we've been doing. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I haven't done a secret word in a while. Let's do a secret word. The secret word is Hebrew. The secret word is Hebrew. Put it in the comments if you got this far in the video. Don't just put the word there because you'll give the game away, but just put it in a sentence. Put the word Hebrew in a sentence, and you'll know, and I'll know, and Hashem will know that you have done some hard yards learning with Jason Jordan. Until next time, bye for now.